morning, everybody. So actually, this is an extension of last year. I did a talk on quantum chaos. I guess while I was talking to Luke, and maybe it was the first conference where that topic was brought up. And it seems to be a growing meta in crypto right now. Yesterday, we had really important spaces, the Ethereum Foundation. I think the day before, Nick Carter wrote a blog about basically this being the #1 priority at Bitcoin, and likewise for Ethereum, particularly when you look at lean Ethereum, it's probably among the top priorities. So I'll just do a quick overview. And so, yeah, it's kind of like in the back of your mind, maybe you've heard of quantum, and maybe you thought about like a gigantic machine that only the NSA or the US military can build, and it looks like a spaceship, and it's 40 years away, and you don't need to worry about it. That's how I used to think about it. And so, you know, these sort of timelines, I guess not too long ago, and what I like to do is I like to tell people, you look at all the timelines. There's the startups, PsiQuantum, IonQ, et cetera. And yeah, it's true, they're probably heavily incentivized to tell you things that are spectacular, and the timelines are rapidly accelerating. But that's because their business model is to raise money. But then you look at the big tech companies, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, et cetera, IBM. Probably they don't really have the same incentives. And then you also look at the government, let's say research labs like DARPA or TII in the UAE, et cetera. And then when you go into the, kind of dig into this and you look into what's actually going on, just on the algorithmic improvement performance, and this is quite an interesting AI use case, which is to say quantum computers are probably almost certainly not very useful without good algorithms. And the reason for that is because qubits are inherently noisy, and so you have to error correct, and you need really good algorithms. And so algorithmic improvement, just in the last couple years, has significantly closed the gap. And so when you look at the crypto ecosystem, I would argue one of the reasons this is becoming one of the big metas that people are talking about is because performance along these roadmaps has not only been on target, but actually accelerating. And the reason that's important is because, yeah, I like to say, by the grace of God, if you're fortunate enough to wake up tomorrow, two things will be true. The sun will be shining, although maybe not in England, and your Bitcoin will be there, provided that, of course, you take good care of your private keys. However, if this trend continues and these networks in our industry does not adapt, and by that I mean migrate, mitigate, change the signature schemes, and you know that requires much bigger signature schemes that fundamentally change performance. Simple way to think about it is post-quantum signatures are 10x bigger than the stuff we're using now based on ECDSA, and so you could expect a 10x performance degradation. And so there are profound, let's say, implications. There's tremendous research going into the space, but that's sort of what blockchains are facing. And I would even argue that we are the first casualty along the way because everything depends on our elliptic curve. There's also, if you're curious, a really cool guy, a buddy of mine named Steve Tipconic. He's on Twitter. He is actually using the IBM cloud right now to break smaller elliptic curves. So he broke a 5-bit elliptic curve, and recently he broke a 6-bit elliptic curve. Now, there's still a long way to go, but the point I'm trying to make is that even right now, today, you can buy qubits on a cloud and do some cool things and start to break much less secure versions of the thing that ultimately underpins our entire ecosystem. Okay, so what I wanted to talk about today was actually, yeah, kind of an evolution of the talk I did last year. We can highlight the risk and the challenges, but let's talk about how we can leverage this technology to build entirely new systems. And so, yeah, based on quantum information theory. And so we've got this notion of the no cloning theorem or the no cloning principle, and that refers to this concept that is mathematically incontrovertible, which is to say that quantum states cannot be copied. And so if you think about a photon traveling through a fiber optic cable, if you think about an atom suspended in a magnetic field, you can actually put some interesting information into that, and that quantum state is now unique. In other words, it cannot be copied, okay? So if we think about that from a first principle standpoint, one of the ways I like to talk about that is finality in blockchains is protocol defined. And so what that means is, well, I guess if we think back to the DAO in Ethereum, we sort of had an issue and then we all just agreed to, well, kind of like change the protocol to fix that issue. And there has been numerous instances where that has happened. A lot of Bitcoiners don't want to talk about the incident. I think it was in 2013 where an extremely huge amount of Bitcoin was printed and basically everything had to get rolled back. And so finality is defined, is protocol defined in blockchains. Leveraging the no cloning theorem, and let me go back here, leveraging the no cloning theorem, finality in this kind of a system would be physically enforced. And so the other way I like to think about that is if you imagine AGI or ASI, it will, I think, seek to exploit every probabilistic game theoretic attack surface of the financial system. And the thing it will attack, in my opinion, is the fact that finality is protocol defined. It cannot attack a system that's physics enforced. If it could, then I guess it can also build a wormhole into another dimension, in which case I want to go on that ride, and who cares about digital assets? So that fundamental first principle leads us to this guy here, Stephen Wisner. So in 1970, he cooked up the idea of quantum money. I think he published his paper, it's a seminal paper, in 1983. And there has been a number of iterations around this concept, this quantum money or quantum enforced finance concept. Stephen unfortunately passed away, I think, in 2021, but he was a remarkable character, a great physicist, and a tremendous researcher. And so, yeah, let's kind of dig into that. What exactly is quantum money? And so, you know, we're talking about, again, the no cloning theorem. So you have these quantum states, and you can think of them as resources, okay? And they are extremely unique. And based on that, you can essentially create as close to a digital analog of cash as possible. And actually, it's almost exactly the same, which is to say, if I come up to any one of you and I want to engage in a transaction and I have a $100 US bill, I give that to you and you give me back something in return. And so that transaction happens locally. It's just between you and I. You trust the transaction because there's security notes in that bill. You can hold it up to the light, you can see the hologram, you can take a marker. You know, there's a bunch of inherent security in that bill, which makes it hard to clone. And so, and likewise with UK money, I mean, it's a different, the constitution of the money, it feels very different, but nonetheless, it has very strong security features baked in. And so, based on that, you trust the transaction. And so, likewise with quantum money, because the digital, let's say, stablecoin equivalent, the security is anchored on this extremely unique state that cannot be copied, you can be very certain that if I transfer 100 quantum dollars to you, instead of giving you a $100 bill, and it appears in your wallet, that it is authentic and it was impossible for that to be some kind of fake or counterfeit. Okay, so yeah, this is kind of what I was saying. It leverages these principles. Now, and by the way, when you look up quantum money on the internet, there's a lot of really cool images. I think it's just a neat rabbit hole to dive into. And yeah, again, quantum information is inherently unclonable, okay? So this is the notion of shifting security assumptions that underpin our financial system from protocols, which define finality in certain ways, such as proof of work mining, where you need to expend a bunch of energy, or proof of stake, where you have to sort of commit a bunch of capital. You don't need to do any of that. Instead, you rely on this fundamental concept in physics. All right, now here's the spicy part. All right, so if we follow that same trend or that same line of thought, currently we have a multi-trillion-dollar ecosystem. That ecosystem has a whole bunch of infrastructure. Now, you can say that a blockchain-based transaction is peer-to-peer because I sort of just need your address and I send it to you. However, there is a middleman. That middleman is the consensus layer. And that middleman is all of this trust infrastructure that exists on a very large global scale. For example, in the UAE, they have a tremendous amount of proof of work mining. When you look at the Ethereum nodes and you look at, excuse me, you look at the validator queue, there's a tremendous amount of economic security, basically money that's tied up in order to have the opportunity to validate transactions. And also, if you look at some of the things that happen in our ecosystem, there are definitely examples where certain transactions maybe can be censored in some ways. And so obviously there's a big debate in Bitcoin right now whether we want to, quote, spam the blockchain with, you know, ordinals and runes and things like that or not. But in any case, the consensus layer is still a middleman, if you will, okay? Which kind of begs the question, what does the future of digital cash actually look like? And so I would argue, and I don't want to be a doomer or anything like that. I think technological evolution is very exciting. We are constantly in a state of change. And just like when Bitcoin came around, it had a profound impact on everything in a very short period of time. And so that will continue. There is no future state where we have like this permanence, other than potentially anchoring things into physics. And so, yeah, are we going to actually need blockchains in the future? I would argue that contingent upon certain dependencies, and I want to be very clear, quantum money is not really around the corner. It's got some ways to go. There are some research dependencies. There is also quantum memory, which is a dependency, because these states can decohere in a very short period of time, and so you don't want to receive a quantum dollar and have it disappear in a few milliseconds. But there are already transactions or use cases where very short periods of time, like where certain types of trading or transactional, you know, institutional flow can happen and settle very, very quickly. And then, of course, there are other dependencies like the quantum internet, which might sound crazy, but I think if you do a bit of Googling and you sort of look into it, you'll be shocked at the scope and scale of the development of this type of infrastructure, particularly in China, definitely in the United States as well. And so if we get these dependencies, these technological innovations, then I think the future of money will be anchored on these quantum principles, the no cloning theorem. I think quantum states as the physical, let's say, enforcement of security will give us true peer-to-peer cash. So just like exchanging cash in a digital form without the need for tremendous, very large trust infrastructure. So I would say, as a kind of final note, I got to go here. Embracing quantum. This is very cool. There are definitely some threats. There are some interesting opportunities. And yeah, I'm not a doomer, but we have to be aware of the risks. And at the same time, I think it's very exciting to think about the innovations that can come from all of this. If you want to learn more about me and Never Local, which is a quantum R&D lab, they focus on contextual cryptography, quantum cryptography. Great guys from Oxford. Come check us out. Thank you very much.